Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Please note that this AI-generated podcast is intended solely for general learning and educational purposes. While we strive to ensure accuracy, the AI may occasionally produce errors or incomplete information. We strongly encourage you to consult qualified professionals and conduct your own due diligence before making any legal, financial, or business decisions based on the content presented here. Also, if you find this content valuable, we kindly request you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell to receive updates on future episodes. Let's begin.
Have you ever found yourself stuck in a situation that just feels like, I don't know, a constant game of whack-a-mole? Like, you fix one problem, right? And then two more just pop up seemingly out of nowhere.
Oh, absolutely.
I know, I have. Just recently, actually, I was talking to Sarah, who runs Revive Coffee Co. Fantastic local cafe right here. She was super excited, want to expand, bring in new product lines, offer loyalty programs, all that good stuff.
Sounds promising.
Yeah, but every step forward, like, getting a surge in customers, it just led to these new, totally unexpected headaches. Supply chain bottlenecks started appearing. Her baristas were getting completely overworked.
Uh-huh.
And even the coffee quality started dipping a bit because they just couldn't manage the increased volume. It's that feeling, where every single solution seems to create a brand new, unexpected problem somewhere else in the business.
It's such a classic scenario, really. And Sarah's experience, or even just thinking about that frustrating traffic jam where adding more lanes just seems to create more traffic.
Right, exactly.
It perfectly illustrates why our usual way of thinking, that sort of linear step-by-step approach, so often falls short. We tend to focus on the isolated symptoms, on fixing the individual parts we can see. But really complex issues like, say, climate change on a global scale, or even just trying to optimize a customer journey in a big company, they aren't simple one-cause, one-effect problems. They're more like these intricate webs, right?
Yeah.
Full of interconnected elements.
Webs, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So what this deep dive offers you today isn't just like a different perspective. It's a really powerful framework. It's called systems thinking, and it lets you finally see that big picture, understand the underlying dynamics, and hopefully move beyond just patching up symptoms to genuinely transforming the system itself.
Okay, so our mission today then is to really extract the most potent, the most immediately actionable insights from a pretty comprehensive guide on systems thinking. We want to give you a true shortcut, not just to understanding this incredibly valuable approach, but maybe more importantly, to starting to use it.
Yeah, to untangle the complexities you see in your own life, maybe in your work, or even in the wider world around you.
Exactly. This isn't just theory. It's really about practical application. So let's dive in. So, okay, when we talk about systems thinking, it sometimes sounds like something, I don't know, reserved for academics or maybe engineers working on complicated machines. But the way you describe it, it feels incredibly practical. How does it actually reframe how we look at a problem? What exactly is systems thinking at its core?
It is profoundly practical, you're right. At its heart, systems thinking is really a holistic approach. It's about understanding complex things, phenomena, situations, whatever, by focusing on how their parts connect, how they interact, and crucially, how they influence each other over time.
Okay, so the connections.
Exactly. It's fundamentally about the relationships between the components, not just the components themselves in isolation. Think about that traffic jam example again. A traditional kind of linear approach might just say, okay, problem, too much traffic. Solution, add more lanes. Simple, right?
Seems logical on the surface, yeah.
But systems thinking makes us pause and ask, well, what happens if we actually do that? Does adding lanes just induce more demand? Does it just pull more cars onto the road because driving suddenly seems easier, making the problem worse in the long run?
Ah, the unintended consequence.
Precisely. That's the classic counterintuitive outcome you get from just linear thinking, where solving one problem in isolation inadvertently creates another one somewhere else. A systemic view, instead, would look at how traffic flow interacts with, say, public transport availability, or the number of people working from home versus commuting, or maybe staggered work hours across different industries, or even those big urban planning decisions about where people live versus where they work.
Yeah.
It forces you to look at the entire ecosystem of mobility in a city, not just the roads themselves.
Right, not just the asphalt.
Exactly. And that broader, interconnected perspective is absolutely crucial because it often reveals that the most effective solution might not be about roads at all. It might be about encouraging ride sharing, or improving bike lanes, or maybe even shifting work schedules.
That makes so much more sense than just thinking, oh, traffic, it's purely a road problem. And it feels especially useful today, doesn't it? I mean, we're constantly bombarded with these huge interconnected global issues, climate change, like you said, supply chain disruptions, which we've all felt, the crazy pace of technological development. Problems now are rarely just contained in one box. They're multifaceted, they span across different disciplines, much like Sarah's coffee shop trying to grow, just on a smaller scale.
They truly are. And this is precisely why systems thinking is, well, it's gaining so much traction. There's extensive research suggesting it significantly helps in solving these complex problems because it forces us to proactively think about those unintended consequences and to make much more informed long-term decisions. It fundamentally shifts our focus away from just looking at isolated events or immediate symptoms, like, say, a sudden dip in sales figures, towards understanding the broader dynamics and the underlying structures of the entire system. Let's go back to Sarah's coffee shop for a sec. If she decides, okay, let's launch a massive new marketing campaign for her loyalty program, great idea on the surface, right?
It seems like a good move for growth.
Sure. But systems thinking would immediately make us ask, okay, how is that surge in loyalty signups likely to ripple through her entire operation? What about the increased demand for specific ingredients? What about the pressure on her baristas?
Yeah, the queues?
Exactly. Potential queue times for customers, the efficiency of her ordering system. If sales suddenly spike because the campaign's a huge success, but her production capacity or her staffing levels or maybe even her ingredient suppliers can't keep up, then suddenly she's got strained resources, frustrated staff, and unhappy customers, all stemming from what initially seemed like a purely positive, isolated marketing push.
Wow.
The key insight here is that pretty much every action, no matter how small or seemingly contained it looks, sends ripples through the entire system. And ignoring those ripples, well, that's where those nasty unintended consequences pop up.
So this isn't just for, like, city planners wrestling with traffic or environmental scientists tackling climate change. Where else can you actually apply this? Is it something an individual like me or Sarah can use? Or is it really just for big organizations and global issues?
Oh, its applications are incredibly broad. I mean, they span almost every domain you can possibly imagine. And the evidence really points towards its utility across a whole wide array of fields. We see practical examples cropping up constantly, demonstrating improved decision-making and more sustainable ways to solve problems.
Okay, like where?
Well, for instance, in business, it's hugely valuable for strategic planning, thinking about organizational design, even just improving how teams work together. It helps leadership understand how different departments or teams might, maybe inadvertently, work against each other.
Ah, the silo effect.
Exactly. Or how the incentives set up for one team might actually create disincentives for another team, undermining the whole effort.
Okay, what about tech? That seems super complex.
Absolutely. In technology, particularly in software development, systems thinking can radically enhance the whole process. It helps teams anticipate how, say, one code change might impact other parts of a really complex application.
Yeah, I can imagine that's crucial.
It is. It helps identify bottlenecks in the workflow much earlier, or foresee how a new feature might affect user behavior across the entire platform, not just in that one little area. It's really about building more robust, more reliable, and ultimately more collaborative systems.
And sustainability. You mentioned waste management.
Yeah, when it comes to sustainability, it's absolutely essential. For tackling these large-scale environmental challenges like waste, you simply can't just focus on, say, recycling bins. You have to consider the entire life cycle of a product.
From beginning to end.
Right, from raw material extraction through manufacturing, how it's consumed, how it's disposed of, and crucially, how policy, consumer behavior, and industrial processes all interact within that system.
Okay, and one more, healthcare. That seems like a place with lots of moving parts.
Definitely. In healthcare, it's being used more and more to profoundly improve patient care by coordinating services across all the different providers, from the doctor's office to the pharmacy, specialists, maybe even at home care. Systems thinking helps identify those critical points where things might fail, helps reduce medical errors, and ensures a much more seamless and effective journey for the patient. Ultimately, that leads to better health outcomes.
Wow.
So yeah, whether you're building software, trying to address global waste, or even just trying to optimize your personal finances, systems thinking gives you this powerful framework to approach it systematically and with, frankly, far greater foresight.
That's a huge range of applications. It really seems like the common thread weaving through all of that is understanding that everything is connected somehow.
That's a great way to put it.
And that leads us neatly into the core principles, right? Because this is where it gets really interesting. Systems thinking isn't just this vague concept. It's actually grounded in several fundamental principles that guide how you apply it. These are like the building blocks that let you start seeing the system itself. Is that right?
Precisely. Think of these principles as the foundational lens, the glasses you put on, to truly understand and analyze these complex systems. The first one, as you hinted, is interconnectedness.
Okay.
This principle basically underscores that all parts of a system are linked, either directly or indirectly. And because of that, actions in one area inevitably have ripple effects somewhere else,
Yeah.
often in surprising and quite distant parts of the system.
Right. Those ripples again.
Yeah, and understanding this is absolutely crucial for avoiding those unintended consequences we keep talking about. Let's take a seemingly isolated business decision.
Right.
Maybe your sales team, right? They're driven by aggressive quarterly targets, so they start offering really significant discounts to boost the numbers.
Okay. Sounds like standard practice sometimes.
It can be. But a linear view might just see, great, increase sales. But interconnectedness forces us to see the ripple effects.
Right.
These discounts might inadvertently erode your profit margins. They could signal a lower brand value to the market. Maybe they create an expectation for future discounts among your customers.
Loyalty killer.
Could be. Or they might even totally strain your production team if they suddenly can't handle the surge in orders, especially lower margin ones. The really surprising insight from interconnectedness is that the most effective fix for a problem isn't always located right where the problem appears to be. It often lies in a seemingly unrelated part of the system, which makes it kind of the ultimate indirect solution sometimes. It encourages you to trace those hidden threads connecting everything.
So it's about seeing all those threads, even the ones you didn't know were there. But doesn't that risk making every problem seem impossibly vast and tangled? How do you even begin to untangle something where literally everything's connected to everything else?
That's a great question, and it leads perfectly to our next principle, which is synthesis. While interconnectedness highlights all the connections, synthesis is about focusing on understanding the system as a whole, specifically by looking at the relationships and the dynamics between its components.
Okay, so zooming out a bit.
Exactly. It's a really critical counterpoint to traditional analysis, which often tends to dissect systems into individual isolated parts, sometimes losing sight of the bigger picture in the process.
Right, analysis breaks things down.
Yeah. So to illustrate, imagine you're studying a forest ecosystem. A purely analytical approach might meticulously examine individual trees, measure the soil composition in different spots, maybe catalog specific animal species, all valuable data, no doubt. But a synthetic approach would step back and look at how the trees provide habitat, how they regulate temperature and humidity, how they contribute to soil health, how the soil microbes interact with the plant roots, how wildlife disperses seeds and maybe affects plant growth, and how all these different elements dynamically interact with the climate to maintain the overall health, the resilience, the biodiversity of the whole forest.
Seeing the whole ecosystem working together.
Precisely. This holistic view helps us see the system's emergent properties. Those are qualities that arise only from the interactions of the parts, not from any single part on its own. The truly insightful takeaway from synthesis is that a system is always more than just the sum of its parts. You can't understand a symphony by just listening to each instrument play alone. You absolutely need to hear them playing together.
That's a powerful distinction, seeing the forest for the trees, quite literally. Okay, and I've definitely heard the term feedback loops come up a lot when people talk about complex systems. It feels like they're kind of the engine of the system, maybe? What exactly are they?
Feedback loops are absolutely the dynamic heart of any system. You nailed it.
Yeah.
They are basically mechanisms within systems that either reinforce, meaning they amplify change, or balance, meaning they stabilize things, counteract change.
Reinforce or balance, okay.
Understanding these loops is absolutely vital for predicting how a system is likely to behave over time, especially how seemingly small changes can lead to vastly different long-term outcomes. We generally talk about two main types.
Okay.
First, reinforcing loops, which are sometimes called positive feedback loops. These can lead to exponential growth, or conversely, they can lead to rapid collapse. Think of a snowball rolling down a hill, right? The more snow it picks up, the bigger it gets, which then allows it to pick up even more snow faster and faster. It accelerates its own growth.
Right, that compounding effect.
Exactly. In a business context, maybe increased customer satisfaction leads to more positive word-of-mouth referrals, which then attracts even more customers, which leads to more satisfaction, creating a virtuous growth spiral. However, the same reinforcing loop dynamic can work in reverse, leading to a downward spiral or decline.
Okay, so that's reinforcing. What's the other type?
The other type is balancing loops, sometimes called negative feedback loops. These work to maintain stability, to bring a system back towards some kind of desired state, or to counteract external changes. A really classic example is basic economic supply and demand.
Oh, okay.
If demand for a product suddenly increases, prices might start to rise. But that higher price then encourages more producers to enter the market, or existing ones to produce more, which increases the overall supply. Eventually, that increased supply tends to bring prices back down towards some kind of equilibrium. That forms a stabilizing balancing loop.
Got it. Keeps things in check.
Exactly. The real insight from understanding feedback loops is realizing that systems don't just react passively, they actually learn and adapt based on their own outputs, their own behavior. And this means that a seemingly small initial push, or just a slight change in how a loop operates, can lead to wildly disproportionate long-term outcomes, both good and bad. It often explains why seemingly logical interventions fail, or why some problems just seem to persist no matter what you throw at them.
So feedback loops really explain the why behind the system's ongoing behavior, how it keeps going or changes course. And then there's causality, which sounds like it gets right to the heart of how things start in the first place.
Yes, causality is definitely about understanding those cause and effect relationships within a system. But, and this is key, systems thinking moves way beyond a simple linear A causes B model. It fully acknowledges that effects can also loop back and become causes themselves,
Ah, circular again.
creating these intricate cycles, often unfolding over long periods and across multiple interconnected elements. This perspective is crucial for truly identifying the root causes of problems and understanding their long-term impacts, pushing us way past just addressing the surface-level symptoms we see.
Okay, can you give an example?
Sure. Think about the complex issue of poverty. Poverty can lead to limited access to quality education. That lack of education can, in turn, reinforce a lack of economic opportunity later in life. And that lack of opportunity then tends to perpetuate poverty into the next generation. You see, it forms this deeply embedded circular causal loop.
Yeah, vicious cycle.
Exactly. And it makes it pretty clear that just pulling on one thread, say, just providing more education without also addressing the economic barriers or healthcare access might not be enough to actually break the cycle. The really profound insight here is that true root causes are rarely simple or linear. They're often deeply embedded in these complex circular causal relationships. By understanding these loops and the underlying causal structures, you can begin to identify not just what's happening, but why it's happening. And crucially, where you might be able to intervene to create lasting systemic change. And that actually leads us directly to the very powerful concept of leverage points, which we'll get to.
Okay.
But these fundamental principles, taken together, interconnectedness, synthesis, feedback loops, and causality, they really help us shift our focus away from just reacting to isolated events towards understanding the underlying structures and patterns. And that shift is absolutely essential for identifying those spots where an intervention can have the greatest, most impactful effect.
That's such a powerful idea. That the problem isn't just what we're seeing right now, but how it's all connected to everything else, often invisibly. And you mentioned earlier, it's not just about what you know, it's also about how you think. It sounds like to effectively practice systems thinking, you need to adopt some specific mindsets. It's a real reframe of your whole cognitive process, isn't it? Like you need to cultivate a new pair of mental glasses or something.
It absolutely is. These mindsets are fundamentally about retraining your brain to see the world differently, to uncover hidden aspects of a system, and frankly, to ask better, more insightful questions within that system. The first one is zooming in and out.
Okay, like a camera lens.
Pretty much. It's the vital ability to fluidly shift your focus between the really minute details of the situation and the sprawling big picture, allowing you to gain insights from different scales. Imagine you're involved in product design, for example. Zooming in might reveal a specific usability issue on an onboarding form. Maybe a button isn't clear or a particular field is confusing users, leading to drop-offs right there. That's crucial detail work, right? You need to see that.
Definitely.
But then zooming out allows you to see how that single form fits into the entire, maybe multi-step user journey. That journey might span across different devices, different touch points over time, and zooming out helps you understand how that form impacts overall customer acquisition or retention.
Seeing its place in the bigger flow.
Exactly. This flexibility helps you prioritize fixes that create the most value for the entire system, rather than just, optimizing one small, isolated part that might not even be the biggest problem overall. The surprising insight from this mindset is that the right scale for analysis is rarely static. It really depends entirely on the question you're asking at that moment. And being stuck at one scale, having rigid boundaries, often blinds us to the most impactful solutions. Tools like systems mapping, which we'll touch on, can really help guide this zooming process, visually showing you the connections as you adjust your focus.
That makes perfect sense. You absolutely need both the micro-level view and the macro-level view to truly understand the context and where to act. What's the next crucial mindset we need?
The second key mindset is shifting perspective. This involves consciously making an effort to view a problem from different angles or maybe through different lenses to identify new patterns and potential solutions that might otherwise remain completely invisible from your usual vantage point.
Getting out of your own head, basically.
Pretty much. We often get stuck in our own professional silos or just our personal experiences and assumptions. In a business setting, for example, if you're trying to improve a customer service issue, thinking about it purely from the customer's perspective will likely reveal very different pain points and insights compared to looking at it solely from an employee's operational viewpoint,
Right.
or maybe from a finance department's cost efficiency lens. Each perspective holds a piece of the truth. The source material actually mentions a fascinating analogy, comparing food waste to old clothing.
Oh, how does that work?
Well, just as old clothes can be repurposed, recycled, or even upcycled to create new value, if you think about food waste not as just trash but as a resource, well, maybe it can be composted, used for biogas energy, or even converted into entirely new products. This kind of analogical thinking can profoundly shift your perspective, foster truly innovative solutions, and reveal entirely new possibilities you hadn't considered. The insight here is that solutions often hide in the blind spots created by your current, often unchallenged viewpoint.
I like that solutions hiding in the blind spots. And the third mindset, well, this one sounds like it hits close to home for anyone trying to be objective, especially maybe if you're in a leadership role. I know I definitely have my own preconceived notions when I approach a problem.
It absolutely does, and it's perhaps the most critical one for achieving objective, truly impactful analysis. Being aware of your own lens. This means actively recognizing your personal biases, your underlying assumptions, your unique experiences, and understanding how they inherently influence your view of the system you're looking at.
So acknowledging your baggage, basically.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
For instance, a senior manager might perceive a problem in the workplace, let's say low team morale, very differently from how a frontline worker experiences it. The manager might see it primarily as a communication issue, needing clearer top-down messaging, whereas the worker might experience it as a fundamental lack of resources, or maybe an unfair workload distribution, or feeling unheard. Their different roles, their responsibilities, their daily experiences literally shape their lens on the situation. The key here is proactive, reflective questioning.
Asking yourself tough questions.
Exactly. Consistently asking yourself things like, okay, what assumptions am I making right now that might be limiting my understanding of this? Or what aspects of this system have I perhaps unconsciously designed or interpreted based on my own convenience or understanding, rather than how it works for everyone involved? These kinds of questions help uncover those hidden biases.
That takes honesty.
It does. The profound insight from this mindset is that our mental models, our internal pictures of how the world works, are incredibly powerful filters. But if we leave them unexamined, they can become like invisible prisons, severely limiting our ability to truly see the system for what it is, warts and all. Together, these three mindsets, zooming in and out, shifting perspective, and being aware of your own lens, cultivate a much deeper understanding. They foster curiosity and empathy when approaching complex problems, and ultimately, they make you a much more effective problem solver.
So it really is about retraining your brain, changing your perception. But thankfully, systems thinking isn't just abstract theory. It actually comes with practical tools to help you visualize and analyze these complex systems. Which is fantastic, right? Because it means you can actually put these principles and mindsets into action. It gives you something concrete to do.
Absolutely. These tools are precisely what bridge the gap from the sometimes abstract concepts to genuinely actionable insights. One of the most fundamental and widely used tools is causal loop diagrams, or CLDs.
Okay, what are those exactly?
They are essentially visual representations drawings, really, of the cause and effect relationships and, crucially, the feedback loops operating within a system. They are incredibly powerful for understanding dynamic complexity, That is, how things change over time because of those reinforcing or balancing forces we talked about, and how seemingly distant actions are actually connected through chains of influence.
So you draw out the connections.
You do. For example, if you were diagramming a business's growth strategy, you might draw a reinforcing loop showing how, say, more sales leads to more revenue, which then allows for more investment in product development, which hopefully leads back to even more sales. That's a virtuous cycle, right?
Right, a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. But then conversely, you might also identify a balancing loop on the same diagram where that same increased demand from the sales surge could lead to strained resources like overworked staff or limited raw materials. That strain could then cause reduced product quality or maybe longer customer wait times, potentially leading to decreased customer satisfaction and ultimately decreased demand, which works against your initial growth push.
Showing both sides?
Precisely. The diagram typically uses arrows to show the direction of causality, and you often add plus or minus signs to the arrows to indicate whether the effect reinforces or opposes the cause. The Systems Thinker Guide, which is a great resource, emphasizes that you should start simple with these diagrams. Don't try to capture everything at once. Focus on the core problem and its most obvious drivers first, and then add elements gradually as your understanding deepens. The goal isn't necessarily to include every single variable under the sun, but to create a diagram that clearly tells the story of the system's key dynamics.
Okay, so it's about visually illustrating those hidden connections and how they create dynamic behavior over time. What other kinds of tools help with this visualization aspect?
Another really crucial tool is systems mapping. Now, while causal loop diagrams focus primarily on the dynamics, the loops and changes over time, systems mapping involves creating a broader, often more static, visual representation of the system's overall components. You map out the key actors, the stakeholders, and their relationships, both the explicit ones and sometimes the implicit ones too.
So like a blueprint of the system.
Exactly. It's like drawing a comprehensive blueprint or maybe a network diagram of the system. It helps you visualize its complexity and figure out where to focus your attention. For example, going back to that complex issue of food waste. I create a systems map showing all the diverse stakeholders involved in the entire food supply chain. Individual households, grocery stores, restaurants, farmers, distributors, food banks, waste management facilities, maybe even policymakers. You'd identify the flows between them, flows of materials like food and waste, flows of information like regulations or demand forecasts, flows of money.
Wow, that sounds like it could get complicated quickly.
It can, but mapping these interconnections facilitates really profound learning, especially when you do it collaboratively in a group. It helps everyone involved see the bigger picture and understand exactly how their piece fits into the whole puzzle. It also helps in a really practical way by forcing you to define the system's boundaries, deciding what's considered in the system for this analysis and what's considered outlined, which is a critical first step, often overlooked in more linear thinking. This visual clarity that comes from mapping can suddenly reveal hidden...
I can absolutely see how that would be invaluable for collaboration, just getting everyone literally on the same page.
Okay, and then there's this concept you mentioned earlier, leverage points. That sounds like finding the really strategic spots to push, the places where your effort actually makes a significant difference, not just, busy work.
That's precisely right, and finding these is perhaps the most sought-after outcome of applying systems thinking effectively. Leverage points were famously identified and articulated by Donella Meadows, who was a real pioneer in this field. These are specific areas or aspects within a complex system where even a relatively small intervention or change can produce significant, often disproportionately large impacts across the entire system.
The biggest bang for your buck, so to speak. Exactly. Meadows categorized these leverage points into various levels, ranging from the fairly superficial, like changing numerical parameters, think taxes, subsidy standards. These often have relatively low leverage, all the way up to much deeper, more fundamental levels. Things like changing the social structures, altering the overarching goals of the system itself, or even shifting the underlying paradigms and mindsets that underpin the entire system. These tend to be points of much higher leverage.
Can you give an example of low versus high leverage?
Sure. Let's say in a company, merely tweaking a minor policy regarding, the length of coffee breaks might have a small localized effect on employee morale, maybe positive, maybe negative, but probably not system changing. That's likely a low leverage point. But contrast that with radically changing the entire company culture, moving towards one of, say, high psychological safety, genuine empowerment, and open feedback. That's operating at a much higher leverage point because it touches on underlying paradigms, shared goals, rules of the system. That kind of change can completely transform how employees interact, how they innovate, how they collaborate, how they perform, leading to profound and systemic improvements across the whole organization.
Much harder to do, but much bigger impact.
Definitely harder, but potentially game-changing. The Uniscap Guide actually details Meadows' original 12 leverage points, offering a really useful framework for thinking strategically about where to intervene in a system to get the most effective, lasting change. The profound insight of leverage points is that effective change isn't usually about pushing harder on the same old levers. It's about finding the right fulcrum, the right place to apply pressure. It's about being truly strategic with your efforts, not just throwing solutions at symptoms and hoping something sticks.
Okay, it's about making your efforts really count where it truly matters most. Let's try and bring this home now. We've talked principles, mindsets, tools. So what does all this actually mean for real-world problems? Where does systems thinking truly come to life, beyond the theory and the diagrams?
Well, its impact is really felt across an incredible range of fields, bringing clarity and often much more effective solutions to some of our most persistent and complex challenges. We touched on some areas, but let's revisit them with specific examples. In business, for instance, it's used heavily for strategic planning, organizational design, process improvement. A key application is aligning team goals with larger organizational objectives to prevent what's often called sub-optimization.
Sub-optimization, what's that?
That's where individual teams might excel at hitting their own specific metrics, their own targets, but they do it in a way that actually harms the overall company's performance. Think about a sales team hitting incredibly high numbers by overpromising.
Right.
Which then means the product delivery team can't keep up, or the quality suffers, or customer support gets overwhelmed. The sales team looks great on paper, but the overall system suffers. Systems thinking helps ensure all the parts work together effectively towards a common vision, focusing on the health and success of the company as a whole system.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about in the tech world? You mentioned software. It seems like it would be incredibly relevant there, just given how complex modern software applications can get.
Absolutely critical. In technology, especially software development, systems thinking significantly improves quality, collaboration, and decision-making. The daily.dev guide, for example, highlights how it helps development teams identify bottlenecks much earlier in the cycle. Maybe it's a code review process that's consistently too slow, or perhaps a testing phase that's always overloaded right before release.
Finding the log jams.
Exactly. It also fosters much better cross-team communication, which is crucial when you have different teams owning different parts of a large, complex application. It ensures they understand each other's dependencies and how their work impacts others. And maybe most crucially, it helps teams anticipate those potential unintended consequences that might arise from code changes or new feature rollouts. Developers can actually integrate tools like causal loop diagrams right into their planning, their design sessions, even their testing strategies to foresee how different parts of the system are likely to interact before a problem even emerges in the wild, potentially preventing costly errors down the line.
That sounds incredibly valuable. What about those really big, thorny social issues or environmental challenges? They often feel completely overwhelming just because of their sheer scale and complexity.
For social ventures and nonprofits, it's pretty much indispensable if you want to create truly impactful and, importantly, sustainable interventions. Take a complex issue like intergenerational poverty, for example. Addressing that effectively requires understanding this whole web of interconnected factors, things like limited access to quality education, inadequate health care, lack of stable employment opportunities, systemic discrimination, housing insecurity. The list goes on.
It's never just one thing.
Never. Systems thinking ensures that the solutions being developed are holistic, that they address the underlying root causes and the multiple dimensions of the problem simultaneously, rather than just putting Band-Aids on isolated symptoms. It's really about building resilient communities for the long term, not just administering temporary aid. Similarly, in sustainability, it's applied to manage environmental issues by understanding the entire ecological and human-made systems involved. Reducing waste, as we discussed, isn't just about putting out more recycling bins. It involves analyzing the entire product life cycle, from how raw materials are extracted to manufacturing processes, consumption patterns, disposal infrastructure, and ultimately designing for circularity, where waste becomes a resource.
Okay, and healthcare. You mentioned coordinating providers.
Right. In healthcare, it aims to improve patient care by better coordinating across all those different providers and settings, aiming to reduce errors and enhance the overall patient outcome and experience. It helps stakeholders see the healthcare system as a whole, everything from hospital administration and insurance policies down to patient flow through different departments and even medical supply chains, identifying those crucial leverage points for improving patient safety, efficiency, and ultimately the quality of care delivered. These diverse applications really demonstrate the vast versatility and the potentially profound impact of taking a systemic approach.
This sounds incredibly powerful in practice, and it makes me think about specific examples. Is there maybe one standout case study you could share that really brings this whole process to life, shows it in action?
There is a truly illuminating one, actually, from the public sector, the Minnesota Solid Waste Management case study. Back in January 2000, Minnesota's Office of Environmental Assistance, which they call the MNOEA, set this incredibly ambitious goal for themselves. They wanted to essentially eliminate the disposal of unprocessed solid waste, basically stuff going straight to landfill by the year 2008.
Wow, that's a huge goal,
Yeah.
especially back in 2000.
It was massive, and it wasn't just about landfills. It was really about transforming an entire statewide waste ecosystem. To even begin tackling this, they recognized early on they couldn't possibly do it alone, operating in a government silo. So they brought together a really diverse group of 27 key stakeholders. This included everyone from ordinary citizens to representatives from various industries, policymakers, environmental groups, a real cross-section.
Okay, 27 different voices. That sounds like a recipe for chaos, honestly, especially on such a complex, probably politically charged issue like waste. How did they even begin to approach it without it just devolving into endless arguments and stalemates?
That's precisely where systems thinking became the catalyst, the organizing framework. They employed a really rigorous, very collaborative systems thinking process over 9 intensive days. They really dove deep. They utilized several key tools we've talked about. Things like causal loop diagrams help them collectively map out the intricate cause and effect relationships and the feedback loops that were currently driving the state's waste system.
Like what?
For example, how increased recycling efforts might impact the market price for recycled materials, sometimes negatively, if supply outstripped demand too quickly. Or how different policy incentives were actually affecting consumer behavior, sometimes in unexpected ways. They also use systems archetypes. These are common, recurring patterns of behavior often found in systems to help them quickly recognize familiar problems, like fixes that fail, where a short-term solution makes the long-term problem worse, or shifting the burden where responsibility gets pushed around instead of the root cause being addressed in their existing waste management practices.
Okay, so recognizing familiar traps.
Exactly. And they also use stock and flow diagrams, which are great for visualizing how materials accumulate and deplete within a system over time. So they could track waste generation rates, diversion rates like recycling and composting, and disposal rates more clearly. Through this really intensive collaborative analysis, which involved a lot of shared learning and perspective shifting among those 27 stakeholders, they managed to develop 10 concrete, actionable recommendations.
And were they actually adopted?
Yes, remarkably, they were ultimately accepted by a special blue ribbon panel convened for this purpose. What was particularly insightful about their findings was how their systemic analysis clearly highlighted the inherent tensions that existed between the current, established waste management practices and what were considered ideal best practices for sustainability.
The gap between is and should be.
Precisely.
All right.
And crucially, one of their key recommendations emphasized the importance of stabilizing the supply of recycled material before just trying to spur more demand for recycled products.
Yeah.
See the systemic logic there.
Let me think. If you just tell everyone to recycle more, but there's no stable market to actually buy and use those materials.
Exactly. You just create a different kind of problem. Mountains of unsellable recycled goods piling up, which can totally erode public trust in the whole recycling effort. Their analysis showed the system needed to be stable and economically viable for the long term, not just focused on diversion rates alone. The process itself highlighted that. And as a follow-up, they even recommended periodic meetings for the stakeholders to continue assessing changes, showing they understood that systems are dynamic, they evolve, and they require ongoing attention and adaptation. This entire Minnesota process really demonstrates the power of collaborative systemic analysis in tackling and achieving these incredibly complex, multifaceted goals that cut across society.
That's a fantastic example of a really comprehensive, truly collaborative approach to a problem that, let's face it, affects absolutely everyone. Are there any other noteworthy cases, maybe from the business world, that illustrate how systems thinking can provide, say, a competitive edge or lead to a real breakthrough?
Yes, definitely. There are many others that showcase its diverse applications and its impact on performance. Caterpillar, the huge, heavy equipment manufacturer, famously used systems thinking principles, although the specific internal details are often proprietary, to essentially remove organizational barriers and significantly improve their global coordination. The core idea was understanding the complex internal dynamics, the information flows, the feedback loops across their vast, sprawling global operations.
Untangling their own web.
Pretty much. This allowed them to identify systemic roadblocks that were hindering innovation and efficiency, ultimately helping them streamline processes and improve decision-making right across different departments and regions. Similarly, Boeing applied something called operational strategy mapping, which is a key systems thinking tool, to better align their overarching business strategy with their day-to-day operational execution on the factory floor and in their supply chains.
Connecting the big picture to the daily grind.
Exactly. This holistic view helped them identify critical dependencies, potential bottlenecks, and key leverage points within their extremely complex production and delivery systems. The goal was to significantly enhance efficiency and ensure that daily activities were directly contributing to achieving their long-term strategic goals, not accidentally undermining them.
Makes sense. Any other quick examples?
Sure. Beyond these giant corporations, systems thinking has been applied successfully to complex challenges in higher education. For instance, looking at ways to improve European learner mobility services by understanding the whole interconnected system of policies, institutions, funding, and student needs. It's been absolutely crucial in many patient safety initiatives within healthcare, helping design safer hospital systems and protocols to reduce preventable medical errors. And it's even been pivotal in enhancing the user experience of government digital services, with projects like those by gov.uk in the UK, where they meticulously mapped complex user journeys and the underlying service delivery systems to make things simpler and more effective for citizens. These cases, drawn from various sources, they all really underline the critical role of deep stakeholder involvement and comprehensive systemic analysis in achieving profound and, importantly, lasting change.
Okay, for someone just starting out, hearing about Boeing and complex statewide waste management in Minnesota is definitely inspiring, but honestly, it could also feel potentially a little overwhelming. How do you even begin to practice this stuff? It sounds like such a big shift in how you view the world, and maybe like something you can't just pick up overnight by reading one article.
It absolutely is a shift, and you're right, it's more of a journey than a destination. But the good news is you absolutely can start small and build your skills gradually. The real key is simply to begin by consciously asking different kinds of questions in your daily life and actively looking for patterns and interconnections that you might have previously overlooked.
Just pay more attention.
In a way, yes, but with a specific focus. You can start using very simple versions of the tools we talked about, like those causal loop diagrams, even for really mundane, everyday scenarios. For instance, pick a simple system that you interact with constantly, like how does your home thermostat actually work to regulate the temperature? What are the parts? How do they signal each other? What's the feedback loop?
Okay, the thermostat.
Or even your household chore routine. How does it work? Who does what? What happens when someone doesn't do their part? What are the feedback loops, nagging praise that keep it going or cause it to break down? Or even just how your personal to-do list seems to grow and shrink. Analyze it. What adds items? What removes them? Are there reinforcing loops making it grow faster? Balancing loops helping you catch up?
My to-do list definitely has some reinforcing loops.
Most of ours do. The Systems Thinker organization even suggests practicing just by reading newspaper articles or daily headlines. Instead of just reacting to the isolated news event, try to pause and identify the underlying systems of dynamics that might be causing that event. What are the connections? What are the potential feedback loops at play? The real power comes from the consistent practice of seeing systems everywhere. And yeah, except that you'll be inexperienced at first. That's totally okay. That's part of the learning process.
That's a really accessible way to start, just changing how you observe the world around you, looking for those connections. I remember trying to figure out why my houseplants kept dying, and I'm eventually realizing it wasn't just, oh, I didn't water it enough. It was the amount of light, the size of the pot, the humidity in the room, the drainage. It was all connected, a little plant system.
Exactly. That's perfect systems thinking in action on a small scale.
Okay, so beyond just observing, are there any specific resources you'd recommend for someone who wants to dive a bit deeper into this? Books, maybe courses?
Absolutely. For foundational knowledge, there are 2 books that are widely considered absolute classics, and they're surprisingly approachable and well-written. The first one is Thinking in Systems, a primer by Donella Meadows. It's just a beautifully written, incredibly insightful book that lays out the core concepts with wonderful clarity and great examples.
Okay, Meadows. Got it.
The second is The Fifth Discipline The Art and Practice of the Learning Organization by Peter Senge. This book really brought systems thinking into the mainstream business world and places a strong emphasis on how organizations can learn and adapt using these principles.
All right. Senge's book is famous. What about courses?
If you prefer more structured learning, there are some excellent online courses available now. Coursera, for instance, offers a course called Systems Thinking for Business, which is a great practical introduction focused on application. For a slightly more academic but still highly valuable perspective, MIT OpenCourseWare actually provides materials from their System Dynamics courses, which delve deeper into modeling and methodologies, often for free.
MIT OpenCourseWare, good tip. And communities, places to discuss this stuff.
Yeah, for ongoing discussion and collaboration, communities like the Systems Thinker website, the systems-thinker.com, are fantastic. They have articles, forums, resources, and various LinkedIn groups dedicated to systems thinking offer great forums to connect with other practitioners, share insights, ask questions, and deepen your understanding through real-world discussions and case studies people share.
Great. And beyond reading and maybe taking a course, what about really simple hands-on exercises you can do, even if you don't have a whole state's waste management system to re-engineer just yet?
Definitely. Beyond just that daily observation habit and maybe structured learning, actively engage in simple personal exercises.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, just sitting down and trying to draw a basic causal loop diagram for an everyday problem you encounter, like the traffic flow on your commute, figuring out the bottlenecks and feedback loops, or even trying to map out the supply chain of your favorite coffee shop like Sarah's. Thinking about how, say, a new marketing campaign impacts barista workload, which impacts customer wait times, which might impact loyalty. Doing that is a fantastic way to practice visualizing these complex interactions. It really helps build that mental muscle for systems mapping and seeing connections.
Just sketching it out.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be perfect. And crucially, remember that third mindset, being aware of your own lens. Make a habit of practicing reflective questioning. Regularly pause and ask yourself, okay, what are my inherent biases here? What are my unique lenses based on my role, my experience that might be shaping how I'm currently viewing the situation? Or what assumptions am I making right now that might be limiting my understanding or maybe causing me to miss some key connections or feedback loops?
Checking yourself.
Constantly. These simple questions, but regularly applied to any challenge, big or small, really help uncover those hidden biases and significantly enhance your systemic understanding over time. It really is a journey of continuous learning and refinement, but every little bit of practice helps build that systemic wisdom, and it can truly transform how you approach problems and how you look for effective solutions.
So wrapping this up, we've really explored how systems thinking is this incredibly powerful framework, isn't it, for understanding and navigating the complex challenges that seem to be everywhere. It offers a genuinely transformative way to make better decisions and, crucially, to create solutions that are actually sustainable because you're seeing those hidden patterns and connections.
Exactly right. By consciously applying its core principles like thinking about interconnectedness and looking for those feedback loops, and by adopting those key mindsets like zooming in and out or deliberately shifting your perspective, and then using practical tools like causal loop diagrams and systems mapping, you really can approach problems much more holistically. And the practical applications in those real-world case studies we discussed, from Minnesota's ambitious waste management goals all the way to software development teams trying to build better products, they really demonstrate its profound and often measurable impact. It truly is about moving from just managing symptoms to transforming the root causes within the system.
It makes me think the world so often feels like just this random collection of isolated events, doesn't it? One problem pops up here, another crisis flares up over there. But what if every single challenge you face, whether it's big or small, personal or global, is actually an invitation to discover the hidden patterns and the powerful connections operating within a larger, constantly unfolding system?
Exactly. And maybe ask yourself, what new possibilities, what potential solutions might open up for you when you stop trying to frantically fix just the individual symptoms you can see and instead start actively looking for those critical leverage points? Those places where a small, well-aimed shift can actually transform the entire system, leading to truly lasting, resilient change.